On with the audio. Oh, yay, there it is. I got it. This is Jackie Luqman, and this is a special Friday evening edition in live in Luqman Nation because we didn't have a show Wednesday because I have been sick. I've been unfortunately dealing with death in my family. And then I came home after the funeral of my grandmother, and I caught the flu. So I have been really just catching up on stuff. So this past week, I was finally able to just kind of chill out a little bit without being really, really sick, without having a lot of stuff to do, although I had to catch up on quite a bit. So I was able to just kind of hang out with Hubs, who is not here yet. He's on his way on Sunday night and watch the Super Bowl. And forgive me if I'm looking down at my phone because, hey Helen, because it looks like I'm trying to make sure we're not having connection issues. And it looks like we might be. Let me see if things smooth out a bit. Smooth out a bit. I'm just in one of those moods. Smooth out a bit. um, so it looks like it looks like things are moving kind of smoothly. Let me know if the audio is okay. If you are hearing any feedback, if you're hearing an echo, let me know, and I'll fix that if I can. Otherwise, listen, y'all, thanks very much for hanging out with us here in Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Luqman Nation. Please check us out, usually on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights. But for the next 8 weeks, we are going to be broadcasting on Thursday nights. We're going to try to broadcast on Thursday nights instead of Wednesdays because we are taking a cool, kick-ass course through our church that is on the history of liberation theology. And I'm going to talk to the professor, who is Dr. Roan Frazier, and I'm going to ask him if he would be willing to allow me to share some of the reading lists so you guys can read how the Christian faith really was used by the formerly enslaved to fight for our freedom. Just some really great information to have if you really want to know why so many people of faith connect their faith to liberation struggle and along with the history of the evolution of the Christian faith as it relates to Black people in this country. Really fascinating stuff. So for the next eight weeks, we're going to be in that class on Wednesday night. So we're going to broadcast on Thursday nights instead. Oh, great. Thank you, Helen. You can hear me good and clear, loud and clear. And we will broadcast on our regular Sunday nights at 6:30 every week. And also, Mr. Pitbull will have his regular Saturday exclusive show on Spreaker. We do not live stream that show. That show can only be accessed through Spreaker, and that is Pitbull's and Politics, Mr. Luqman's show on Saturday nights. You can also follow us on YouTube. Those of you who are on YouTube, thank you very much for joining us on YouTube. The chat is open, so please say hi over on YouTube, those of you who are watching there. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Luqman Nation 1, one word, LuqMannation, the number 1. Please support Luqman Nation. We are still working on this documentary, slowly but surely. We are working on this documentary, so you can contribute to supporting Luqman Nation, not just with the documentary, but with everything else we are doing. We are members of the United National Anti-War Coalition. We are members of the Virginia Defenders, and who will have a monthly segment with us on our show coming up starting this month. We are supporters of Friends of the Congo, and we will be talking to members of Friends of the Congo to get information about what's going on in the Congo and in other areas in Africa that are critical to understanding the international struggle against imperialism. We focus on local issues. We are members of Empower DC, which is an organization that supports tenants' rights, the rights of tenants in low income and public housing. We are supporters of One DC that does the same thing and also works with other oppressed communities in the district. We do a lot of stuff. We are good friends with Eugene Puryear and Sean Blackman, who are gracious enough to have us on our show pretty much every Friday by any means necessary. We are good friends with our beloved sister, Anoa J. Shanga down in Atlanta, Georgia, who gives you through Peach Perspectives all the scoop on Atlanta politics. We are just really trying to have our hands and our feet and our toes in a lot of things. And we're doing this because we want to amplify these stories. We want to let people know and help people understand that, yeah, politics is local. All politics is local, but we want to be able to share other people's struggles with people that maybe would have never heard about these people. And so maybe people can get ideas about how to go about growing their coalition. Maybe they can reach out to these people, or maybe these people have ideas for doing things that other people hadn't thought of. Telling the stories of people's struggles is how we connect our struggles together. So please, whatever you can, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, Helen, and thanks for asking people to share, Morgana, on Facebook. So please support Luqman Nation. You can do that with monthly support through Patreon. You can do it with a one-time donation through GoFundMe, and you can support us through a one-time contribution through PayPal. You can find all of those platforms for Luqman Nation under Luqman Nation, Luqmannation, Patreon, GoFundMe, and PayPal. Oh, actually, PayPal is PayPal me, Luqman Nation. So, hey Trisha, what's going on? Hi Carrie. Trisha, it's good to see you. Now that I got all of that out of the way, and I did everything but get my drink so that I wouldn't have a dry mouth, because there's so much stuff we got to talk about. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing to our Patreon. I'm looking at the chat over on YouTube. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So I said we watched the Super Bowl last Sunday, and we did. And yes, we have not been watching football for years. Actually, I have to say I haven't been watching football for years because I'm the football fan in the house. My husband I don't even understand how we even got married. Me knowing that he was not a football fan. But I am the type of football fan who on Sundays you have to not bother me, because I'm going to church early and I am coming home so I can watch the pregame shows, and I'm making my snack and my dinner so that I don't have to cook later on, because I don't want to miss the game that starts, I don't want to miss the evening. I'm that kind of, my mother used to know, she used to time when to call me when football games were on. She would turn the television on, turn the game on to see if there was a commercial on or not. And if there was not a commercial on, she knew not to call me. But when the commercial came on, she would call me because she knew I wasn't answering the phone. If she called me and the game was playing. That's how much of a football fan I am. So for me, it was a big, huge, gigantic, ginormous deal to stop watching football in support of Colin Kaepernick's efforts in activism, right? I'm so glad I was able to shout you out, Lisa. I really am. Um, but, you know, as much as I missed football, what Colin Kaepernick knelt for was much more important. And so, you know, I didn't mind not watching football. And it got to a point where I was like, well, okay, I don't really miss it. Yes, Helen, I will put links in the comments later for all of this stuff. I absolutely will. And please invite your friends. Invite friends to watch this video as well as share. You can see Brewski making himself comfortable in the in the background. And he is just he's just gonna seriously video bomb me right now. Oh, our dog. Hey, hey, hey. No parts licking during the show. None of that. So anyway, so yeah, I've been boycotting watching football, watching the NFL for not just this year, but for the entire time that Kaepernick has been not signed. So I guess it's been what, like 3 years maybe. And we decided that, you know what, we're gonna watch the Super Bowl, because I didn't even realize until Thanksgiving. No, I didn't realize until maybe a month before the Super Bowl that the Eagles were going to that the Eagles were in the playoffs. And I was just like, how did that happen? When did the Eagles become good, right? And you know, of course, everybody expects the Patriots to go to the playoffs. So anyway, I decided, you know what, I'm going to watch this Super Bowl because I love rooting for an underdog. I love rooting for the team that nobody expects to win. And nobody expected the Eagles to win against the Patriots, right? And I really, really dug that it's the Eagles that went to the Super Bowl. The Eagles, that was the team that was like the most vocal or the most demonstrative in supporting Kaepernick. Out of most of the teams in the NFL that were going to the Super Bowl against the Patriots. And the Patriots they were like the symbol of you know, this all-Americanism, right? So it was like this huge, like, symbolic thing that it seemed like to me, this underdog, you know, scrappy neighborhood kids, the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the underdogs. He's just making himself comfortable back there. Don't be afraid. I know some people are thinking, what is he about to do? He's just, hey. So we're watching the Super Bowl. Hey, Cindy, what's going on? And it was funny because I was kind of making Facebook status updates as we were watching. And the game, of course, was great. It was a great game. The Eagles played their hearts out. They really just did. And the Patriots did what the Patriots do. As much as I hate the Patriots, I can't take away from the fact that they really are a very, very good team. But the Eagles just would not give up. And the Patriots just weren't up to their game. I think they were kind of stunned by how good the Eagles actually were. And the Eagles were able to pull out that win in the Super Bowl. And that was great. It was a great underdog story. I loved it. I love watching an underdog story. I love rooting for the underdog. But here's what pissed me off about the Super Bowl. You knew I was getting to something that pissed me off, right? Here's what really pissed me off. There are people who have known that my husband and I have been really, really politically active and have really ramped up our activism in the past 3 years, especially since we started doing this particular show, right? Because we were doing our show on Blog Talk Radio and we didn't get any kind of traction. Then we switched over to Facebook and started live streaming through another group at first, but then we started doing our own thing. So then we started getting involved in more local stuff and incorporating that into our show and putting all this information out and exposing, you know, elevating all these stories and talking about all these issues that we knew people didn't know about. because it's not highlighted on the news, right? And the whole time, there are all these people. Some of these people were my own family members. There are all these people who never supported anything we did. I mean, these people didn't like a Facebook post. These people didn't share a video. They didn't contribute no money. We would say, hey, there's a protest here, or, you know, there is a teach-in here, or hey, this is happening in your neighborhood. It would be cool if you could go and you could learn something. And these people, they would never go. They would never support us. They would never acknowledge anything we did. So I kind of thought, okay, maybe they're just not watching. Maybe they're just not paying attention to what we're doing, right? But all of a sudden on Super Bowl night, some of these people were the very same people who never commented on anything, but they have ever so much to say about, oh, well, I thought people were boycotting the Super Bowl, but you got ever so much to say. And some of these people actually said that because we were very critical of Justin Timberlake. Not even gonna talk about that foolish halftime show. So like the first like really blow my mind issue about the Super Bowl, and I'm not going to spend a whole crazy amount of time on this. I just thought this was interesting that for 3 years, we have been on our grind on this show. Yeah, we've done less stuff than other people. We've done more than other people. But for us, we've been on our grind. And people that we know, people I go to church with, I used to go to church with, people, like I said, in my family, people in his family, don't say a damn thing. Haven't said a word, not a peep, nothing about anything we have done. All of a sudden, we watch the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, let me pronounce it correctly. All of a sudden, we watch the Super Bowl. Then all of a sudden, people want to criticize us because, oh, I thought y'all were boycotting. For real? Really? In 3 years of us talking about police brutality, Black Lives Matter, mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, environmental racism, the military-industrial complex, growing American imperialism, unjust wars, drone bombings, poison water, let's see, what else? Sexual abuse in law enforcement. In the 3 years we've talked about that. Oh, gentrification. The wage gap between white and Black Americans, the income gap between white and Black Americans, the wealth gap between white and Black Americans. We've talked about all that stuff, and these folks had nothing to say, not a zip, zero. We watched the Super Bowl, and then these folks want to call themselves calling somebody out. You've got to be kidding me. You want to impress me? Respond to some of the stories that we post. Send us some money so we can pay for gas to get back and forth to Richmond to meet with the Virginia defenders. Send us some money so we can finish this documentary. You want to really show me that you are paying attention, that what we do is important to you? Because, see, that's how I know these people actually do pay attention to what we do. You would have never known we were boycotting watching football just because I posted some stuff about the Super Bowl. You would have never known if you hadn't been kind of lurking on our page the whole time, not interacting, participating, commenting, supporting. Nothing. But you really want to make your opinion valid and relevant for us? Find an organization where you live, where you are, and get involved with them and send us some information that we can highlight about what you are doing. Because, see, it's ridiculous to me that some of these people criticized people, not just me, but other people who watched the Super Bowl, watched the football game for one night. You got ever so much criticism for those people, but these people who have all this criticism for us watching a football game for one night haven't done jack shit for racial equality and justice any other time. Nothing. None. So I just thought that was really interesting, that just really blew my mind that people would actually be that like petty. I mean, especially people who I know full well really are not doing anything in the way of fighting for racial justice and equality. Nothing. They ain't doing nothing. But okay, let me get off that. So, I'm trying not to be as petty as other people are. Hey Shirley, what's going on? Thanks for joining us over on YouTube. Yeah, so obviously the big deal with the Super Bowl was that horrendous Dodge Ram commercial. Now, I posted at first that the only way that commercial could have been made was for Dodge to have gotten permission from the King estate. And then like a few hours later, or maybe the next morning, somebody responded to me on Twitter and said no. Bernice King immediately said she did not approve Martin Luther King Jr.'s quotes to be used in that Dodge Ram ad. Well, here's and I immediately, and this is how I hope you realize that here in Luqman Nation, we don't think we're right about everything all the time. We can be wrong. We get our signals crossed. We get excited about stuff and put information out there too soon without always doing all our due diligence. We've done that a couple of times. So we're not above correction, and we appreciate when people pull our coattails and say, hey, yo, you don't have all of the facts, you don't have all the data, this is another side of the story, or that's just not right, or that's just incorrect. And we'll look into it and we're like, yeah, we put our foot in our mouth on that one. And that's what I did at first when this person tweeted, what's going on, cuz? When somebody responded to our tweet saying that, the only way Dodge could have used Martin Luther King Jr.'s quotes in that horrendous commercial was if they got permission from his estate. Bernice King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, did in fact say that she did not approve that quote being used by Dodge Ram. So I thought, okay, we were wrong. Here's the thing, though. Bernice King does not represent the legal entity that approves licensing for the King estate. Bernice King is the representative for the King Center, which everybody thinks is the King estate, but it's not. There is another entity. I have to look the name up again because it was right at the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember what it is right now. But it is actually another legal entity that approves the use of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches, his words, and his images. That entity is not the King Center. That entity is not run by Bernice King. That entity is run, I think, by one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s surviving sons. That entity did, in fact, approve the words of Martin Luther King Jr. to be used by Dodge in that horrendous commercial. So, actually, we were right from the beginning. So, if you haven't seen the commercial, I think we'll post a link to it. I'm not going to show it to you now because it's offensive to me. I mean, it's like personally offensive to me. Because Martin Luther King Jr. Oh, you're welcome, Trucito. Because it was confusing as heck. It was so confusing. But when you understand that the King Center is a different and separate entity from this other organization that does the licensing, approves the licensing for the King estate, then you understand why. Yeah. So Martin Luther King Jr. lost a lot of the popularity that he had, which was never as much as people today think it was. But he began to lose favor with white people and a lot of black people when he came out against the Vietnam War, and he began to speak out against American militarism and imperialism around the world. And it was offensive for Dodge Ram to use the words of Martin Luther King Jr., first of all, to sell trucks. All right. Especially since the sermon that those quotes came from went on to condemn the growing consumerism in the United States. See, this is why, brothers and sisters, we need to make sure that we are the ones who are rightly dividing the narrative of our people. All right? This whole thing about Martin Luther King Jr. Only talking about being peaceful and nonviolence, Martin Luther King Jr. said a whole lot more than "I had a dream" and let's not, and I prefer nonviolence. He said a lot more than that. And the only way for us to get the narrative about Martin Luther King right, and to be able to point out when people are manipulating his words to twist his message, is if we actually know what he said. So the reason there was so much backlash to that ridiculous commercial was because a lot of us do know what he said. And the fact that words from that sermon, in which he later goes on to condemn materialism, it wasn't just offensive to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., it was ignorant. It was just ignorant of them to do. But then if you watch the entire commercial, and I know it was hard to do because the whole commercial, I'm sitting there with my mouth open, and I'm like, my husband and I are sitting there like, is that Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice? Is that a truck? Are they selling a truck? They're selling a truck with Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice. And then what floored us both was the fact that they had a unit of Marines in full dress uniform, in formation, marching, just, in parade style, in for a car company to use the words from a sermon that goes on to preach against consumerism, but also to use the words from a man who became an enemy of the state, became more of an enemy of the state because he came out publicly against American militarism and imperialism to push this fake-ass, patriotic, love your country message in this truck ad was personally offensive. It was just the most vile. I mean, to me, that's just worse than people making it's just worse than racists saying nasty things about Martin Luther King. You are taking advantage of, and you're manipulating the words and the ideals of a man to push ideals that same man opposed. And see, they're doing it to people who they know don't know anything about Martin Luther King Jr. See, most of the people who attend the Super Bowl, most of those people are white. Who attend the Super Bowl. Yes, there are some black people in attendance. But most of us can't afford those tickets. Most white people can't afford those tickets either. Most poor working white people. But most of the people who watch the Super Bowl, these marketers on Fifth Avenue, they knew that a lot of people would not be watching the Super Bowl this year. A lot of black people would not be watching the Super Bowl this year. So they figured this is a perfect time for us to get this message across that Martin Luther King Jr., the epitome of American, what do I want to call it? What do I want to call it? American unity. Yeah. That this is what Martin Luther King Jr. gaslighting. Thank you, Patrick. That this is what Martin Luther King Jr. would approve because he's all about unity. See, they could say that to an audience full of people who don't know garbage about Martin Luther King Jr. other than I had a dream and he was an advocate of nonviolence. See, the Fifth Avenue marketing crew thought that a bunch of black people would not be watching the Super Bowl because we've been boycotting the NFL for a few years. But we wanted to see the Patriots lose. We really wanted to see Donald Trump's friend get that ass kicked. And he did. So we watched. And we saw that garbage. And we responded immediately. And the nice people at Dodge had to apologize. I think they have since scrapped the ad. I'm pretty sure that ad will never see the light of the day again. So, I mean, that was like the big, huge thing from the Super Bowl. And Brewski is losing his gourd right now because Papa just came in. So we're going to switch the cameras over in a minute to get Mr. Luqman in. Let's see. Let me see if I can do this seamlessly without breaking anything. Because you know how I do. Let's see. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Victim of DC traffic.
Let's see if we can get in closer. So we can not get half your face. Because we are sharing a microphone. Because we have not figured some stuff out. Ooh. So, hi.
Hey, baby.
How you doing?
All right.
Good. So, yeah, I was just wrapping up the whole Super Bowl thing. We got people on, got our friends on YouTube. Got a couple people on YouTube. Got a few friends on Facebook.
All right.
And so that was the Super Bowl thing, y'all. And the whole Justin Timberlake thing, let me just suffice it to say that I hate Justin Timberlake. I've always hated him. I've never liked him. I always thought he was mediocre. That whole halftime show was the whitest halftime show since the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And that's messed up because I really like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I mean, the Red Hot Chili Peppers are funky as hell.
Oh, yeah.
I like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I feel bad. The Red Hot Chili Peppers were funkier than, and the whole, it was just a mess. You know how bad, you want to know how bad the halftime show was? Justin Timberlake's entire marching band was white. Whole marching band. When was the last time you saw an all-white marching band at the Super Bowl? But you know why he had an all-white marching band?
Why is that?
Because if he had a marching band from an HBCU, they would have shown him up.
Oh, yeah.
He couldn't have that. So, okay.
His little wigger cred would have been...
I was doing good with calling people names. So that's the Super Bowl, guys. Thank you. Somebody said you guys are darling. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. We try.
We do try. Well, we don't actually try. We're just kind of goofy like that.
Oh,
just,
yeah.
You know, kind of naturally. So, okay. Now, this is, I want to talk about this story a little bit because there's some information in this story that I know people don't know. I didn't even know it until I started researching it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I think we all heard the story about the, how do you pronounce it? Is it livery driver? Is it livery?
Livery, yeah.
Livery.
Yeah.
So in New York, there are taxi drivers and there are livery drivers. And liveries are like private taxi services. They're not like you go out to the corner and you hail a cab. A livery service, you call that service. You call and schedule a car to come pick you up. So last week, I think it was, a New York City livery driver went to the steps of City Hall and committed suicide after he gave this incredible impassioned speech about how when he started out in this business, it was a 40-hour week. He'd work 40, maybe 50 hours a week, and he could earn a living.
Yeah, he could make a good living off of it.
But now, because of Uber and Lyft, they have pushed him to having to work over 100 hours a week.
Wow.
And he just couldn't live anymore under those conditions, having to work that much and not making the same amount of money that he was making when he was working 40 hours a week, doing the same job, right? And this man commits suicide. That's how desperate the situation was for him.
And I think that we had drew comparisons to the guy in Tunisia.
Yes.
The fruit stand guy that set himself on fire when started the Arab Spring.
Arab Spring. But it also connected to some things that you and I have noticed, like when we're just out all the time, like when we go to the grocery store, when we go shopping, when we go to the movies, when we go anywhere in our immediate area, we see a lot of drivers, a lot of people with Uber and Lyft, Uber or Lyft, we're seeing more and more people with both signs for both companies on their cars. You know, the decals that people put on their cars, right? The Uber and Lyft decals. And we talked about how that signifies the fact that we live in a neighborhood where all of these people are taking on a second gig. Right. And I've used Uber, I've used Lyft, and I've talked to both groups of drivers, and they all say with the exception of maybe two of the drivers, they have all said they all have part-time jobs. They all have full-time jobs rather, and the Uber or Lyft job was supplemental
income.
But they said they need it.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like they were doing it like 20 years ago. I was $10,000 in debt for no good reason. Look, see, he's saying that because he knows how I am almost like psychotic about money. I'm just a little. Yes, I am like, how much is that? How much is that going to cost? Do we need to buy that now? I have an app on my phone so I can check the balance, and I'm that way because I used to be very, very irresponsible with money. And I had credit cards that I ran up, and I was $10,000 in debt, and I have nothing to show for it but a bunch of mismatched clothes.
And shoes.
I did have some great shoes though, and some great jewelry. But so I had to get myself out of debt. So I got a second job. And this was like 20 years ago, I think. Probably almost 30, but about 20 years ago. So I got a second job. And I got a second job working in the Value City department store over here. And I worked, 4 hours, 3-4 nights a week. And that's how I paid off my debt. But see, I did that because I felt like I needed that extra income for a specific purpose to pay off my debt. Right. And I did that. And from doing that, and never,
I mean, it wasn't the case that you had to survive.
Exactly. And that's the problem now with all of these people that we see who are driving for Uber and Lyft. The reason Uber and Lyft are becoming or have become so successful is because people need that additional income to make ends meet.
And I remember we was talking about earlier today how these corporations like Uber and Lyft and other corporations has gotten into what we call the hustle. Because prior to Uber and Lyft, there was hacks. A lot of us come from cities where, you had to hack.
Right.
You know what I mean? And in Baltimore, they're famous for it, where you just stand out there, you wave, and somebody come and, You negotiate a price with them.
Right.
The city that I'm from used to be the same way. And so now what happened was the same way with the lottery too. When before the state got into the lottery system, organized crime. I remember I grew up during the time of the number man.
Right. The numbers runners.
Yeah, you had the little shady guy that would come by, and I was a kid, I didn't know, but the shady guy would come by, and my grandmother and them would get their little coins together. And
the
stuff
little
like that.
slips of paper.
Yeah. And then what happened was the state realized what a great moneymaker that was. So then they come in and then they got the lottery. So that was another thing that poor people lost out on.
Right. So, I mean, we see all of these people around us, and I'm sure you guys see the same thing too. People you probably know 2 or 3, maybe more people who are driving for Uber and Lyft, not because they want to, because they're wanting to pay for, their family vacation, but because they need to pay the mortgage, they're not making enough money on their regular job.
Right, but look at the thing with Uber and Lyft and all, and the thing that you got employees who don't have, once again, they don't have medical, they have no protection.
Exactly.
They don't have any kind of job security or any of those type of things.
Right. And see, companies like Uber and Lyft, they know how desperate the American population is. That's their business model. The success of the business model of companies like Uber and Lyft, I am convinced, is predicated on the economic desperation of the American population.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can expand that and say the world, because Uber is in England,
that's
and
true.
France,
That's
they're
true.
everywhere,
Right. And this is how I know this is true. This is how I'm convinced that we're right on this. You can lease a car through Uber and Lyft.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How many of you guys knew that? Right? I know we've got some great conversation going on in the Facebook chat. Y'all over here on YouTube, y'all are having a great conversation over here. But yeah, you can lease a car through Uber and Lyft. And I think there's another car sharing service that's emerging now, and I'm pretty sure they'll have the same thing. Now, you might ask yourself, I'm sure you're asking yourself, how does Uber and Lyft, which is pretty much it's a public transportation service, right?
Yeah.
How did they get legally, how did they get in the business of also being an auto finance company?
Good question.
Right? Let's put a pin in that question, okay? Excuse me. You can also pay for the auto lease through working for Uber and Lyft. The way Uber and Lyft do this is they don't have the same credit requirements that your traditional auto lenders would have. So even people who have credit that's so bad that they can't get a loan from, the worst auto lender that would give, they can lease a car through Uber and Lyft by driving for Uber or Lyft for, they claim, a few hours a week.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That driving for Uber and Lyft pays the lease for the car. And the lease is the standard 3 years, I think, for Uber and Lyft. Sounds like a great deal. And if you are poor and you need transportation, and that transportation means the difference between you taking not having a job in your neighborhood where you live,
right,
and public transportation doesn't go out to where the jobs are, and you being able to get a job in a suburb that's farther than public transportation goes, and you haven't been able to get a car outside of this, of course this is going to look good to you.
Oh yeah.
Of course this is going to look good to you. But of
there's
course,
always a catch.
You know what?
There's
all the time.
Always a catch.
Every time something seems too good to be true, it is. Because just like predatory auto lenders, people with bad credit are charged astronomical interest rates. And right off the bat, think about what are those Rent-A-Center?
Yeah.
So leasing a car, and if anybody is considering this, please share this video with them. Share this show with them. Mark the time in this video, whatever this time stamp is, and explain this to them. leasing a car through Uber and Lyft is like buying or is like leasing a refrigerator from Rent-A-Center. Okay? Yes, you'll get a refrigerator that you wouldn't have been able to purchase if you went down to where Sears is going out of business wherever people buy refrigerators now.
Right. One of the appliance stores.
Where do people buy refrigerators
PC
anymore?
Richards or something like that?
Yeah. Oh, H.H. Gregg, which is also about to go out of business too. Yeah, so where do people buy refrigerators anymore? So, yes, you will get a refrigerator, but you will end up paying more over the life of that lease for that refrigerator than the refrigerator actually costs. So, if the refrigerator costs $300, by the time you end that lease that you're paying every week on that refrigerator, you could have bought like 3 or 4 refrigerators, and you could have just saved up that money. So it looks like a good deal on the front end, and it looks like it solves a problem immediately, but on the back end, it really doesn't, because the lease terms are like $399 a month for not even a luxury car, right? The $499 a month are like the lease terms for good credit for a Lincoln Continental. We're talking about like a Toyota. Okay, so whereas if someone were to lease maybe a Maxima or something like that, and they had halfway decent credit, they could get a lease for $199. Do you see where the hook is? So it's not true if you're trying to lease a car through Uber and Lyft that you only have to work a few hours a week. No. Because the market is so saturated now with drivers. People who are doing who are working for Uber and Lyft have a harder time picking up fares. So they're making less money.
Right.
And they're having to work longer hours. So they're not really able to afford these leases by just working a few hours a week and picking their own hours. They're really having to work a full second job.
Yeah, because it started off like that. A lot of people got in there and started off with the flexibility of hours and all that stuff. But like you said, with the oversaturation of the market, everybody getting into it now it's not even worth it a lot of times for a lot of these drivers, Uber and Lyft. I knew a couple of guys who went into the Uber thing and the Lyft thing, and they say they're not even making nowhere the money that they used to make.
Yeah, and that's not because people who are driving for Uber and Lyft are greedy. It's because people who are driving for Uber and Lyft are desperate.
Exactly.
We are economically desperate, and people need a second gig that they can work without killing themselves. And driving is one of the things that most people know how to do. And they can safely do. And if they can get a car that's reliable, that they can use for 3 years, and I can tell you what the thinking is. People are thinking, I do this with my regular job, and I do this Uber and Lyft thing on the side, and I can save up some money, and I can get my own car, and then I don't have to do this anymore. But then those lease terms kick in, and not picking up as many fares as you need to pay off that lease kicks in. And the next thing you know, you're working for Uber and Lyft for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years while you're working your regular job, and you're still not seeing any extra. So this is the situation this livery driver was in. And this man was pushed to the point where he just couldn't take it anymore. He just could not take being economically desperate and pushed to the point where he was literally working himself to death. You can't work 100, 120 hours a week and survive.
And just as a reminder, most of these livery drivers, they own that, like they're owner operators.
Right.
So he owns that car.
Right.
Right.
He's got to pay for gas and insurance. And in New York, he's got to pay for tolls, and he's got to pay for parking. Do you know how much parking is in New York? So, these are real. So then let's go back to the question that we asked before. How does a public transportation service or a car service or a transportation service get into the business of auto financing? Here's the information that I didn't know about Uber and Lyft that I'm sure you didn't know either. And Lisa Webb says on the chat in YouTube, Fingerhut is another financing company that does it. It's true, and I've used Fingerhut because
Fingerhut's been around forever.
I've been broke enough to have to use Fingerhut. So I agree with you.
We all use Fingerhut.
Everybody's used these companies don't stay around because they have nothing. They stay around because Americans are broke. We're broke.
That's right.
So let me get to this. Uber and Lyft spent 33% more money on lobbying than Walmart and Amazon combined.
You kidding me?
No.
Oh my God.
So if you want to know how it is that a public transportation company was able to get the authority to also move into the auto leasing business, that's how they did it.
Now you get a couple of politicians on your side.
You get a couple of politicians on your side. You hire a lobbying firm to go to the state level, and this is actually what Uber and Lyft did. They got lobbyists to go to state politicians to lobby for legislation that was favorable to Uber and Lyft so that they could get involved in a market that their original business model did not cover.
Wow.
Uber and Lyft spent 33% more money than Amazon and Walmart combined. How were they able to do that? That's our money, y'all. They're making money off of the economic desperation of the American people.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, and I had here the note about the Tunisian fruit cart driver. That man set himself on fire. I don't know if you remember the kickoff, the thing that sparked the Arab Spring, but it was a fruit cart driver.
It was a college-educated fruit cart
Yes. Driver. This man had done, tell me if this doesn't sound familiar to you. This man, he was a working man, but he was an educated man. He had a college degree, but he was out there doing whatever he could do in the current climate of his government, because government at the time was not friendly to the educated class, right? Who were openly saying things in opposition to the government at the time. So he wasn't able to get a job using his degree. So this man was out there doing whatever he could do to support his family. He was pushing a fruit cart. And the repression by the government on independent contractors, owner-operators like himself was so brutal that he couldn't even make any money selling fruit on the street. And he was so desperate and so full of despair that he set himself on fire.
Yeah, and I think one of his complaints was the fact that not only was the government taking most of his money, but then he had to deal with the bribery of the police.
Exactly.
And everybody was just coming at him, you know.
So he became so desperate and so despondent about his prospects to do any better in life that he figured he didn't have any other options but to end his life. And then people saw what that man did and heard his story, because it was live streamed on Facebook in Tunisia.
Right.
And that was the spark. That was the spark that got other Tunisians to say, wait a minute. No, this is screwed up. This is screwed up that the government represses us and the police are corrupt and we don't know who to trust and we can't make a living and we can't trust our government. And sound familiar? So what's it going to take for us? Donald Trump is the only time we're going to mention him in this broadcast. Donald Trump wants a military parade, and he said he wanted a military parade after he went to France and witnessed their Bastille Day parade. So he says, oh, I want a military parade like you guys have. Okay, that's fine. But I say let's give him a reason to have a Bastille Day-like parade. Let's implement let's make sure we implement the Bastille Day part of the parade.
Yeah, nobody talks about that part.
Right, the part,
Right.
the part of the French Revolution that they commemorate.
Exactly.
Where the people stormed the Bastille because they were pissed off at the ruling class.
Mm-hmm.
Look up the French Revolution and Bastille Day. But okay, so you mentioned police.
Right.
Shirley Vick over here on YouTube said this country is starting to become like that. It is so slow. I think that some of us, we're 50.
Yeah.
Right? And our parents were, fighting for a revolution in their 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And their parents were fighting for a revolution in their 20s. So for some of us, and their parents and their... So for some of us, we're like, when y'all white people gonna get with this revolution? Because, every time we try to start a revolution, we get shot. We go to prison. We die. And then most of the white people in the country like, they should just obey the police. If they would just obey...
Yep, just obey the police.
So we're just look. The revolution really is on y'all. It really is. Honest. It's just y'all just have the numbers. You just really do.
I like Trisha Roberts said, and I like this. She said the oligarchy want a feudal situation, serfs and lords. That is the direction that the oligarchy is pushing us to. And I say that it's already here. It's been here for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what it is that they no longer fear the people, and that's what it is. They no longer fear the people.
And it's funny. I think I was reading something the other day by Eugene Debs. If you don't know who Eugene Debs is, look him up. EugeneDebs. He wrote something in 1900.
Wow. What did he write?
Where I think that was the first time I have seen someone use the word oligarchy. So people think that, you're talking about, that this country is turning into an oligarchy. We've been an oligarchy for a minute.
Yeah.
We've been an oligarchy for a very,
well, I would say that we've been an oligarchy since its founding. Actually,
this country was founded that they told you that it was founded as a democracy. They told you it's a republic. That's not what the people who actually hold the power know it is. Okay, we're getting off track. That's another show. But you mentioned in the Tunisian uprising that led to the Arab Spring, the fruit cart drivers, that martyrs. Because he was a martyr. That martyr's other complaint was that the police were so corrupt that whatever little money that he had left after the government took their massive cut, he had to give to the police because they were so corrupt.
Right.
And if you don't think that's where we are in this country, you don't understand what's going on and what's been going on. So that's the rest of our big discussion, right? So there was a story out of New York City. And again, as always, we'll provide you the links to all of this information after this video is processed, so you can read all this stuff, you can share it, you can research more yourself. But there's a story out of New York City where a young woman was raped by 2 police detectives. Mm-hmm. She did the brave thing and she reported it. She found out when she reported the rape that New York is one of 35 states where if police officers are accused of raping someone who is in their custody, those police officers can merely claim that the sex they had with the person who was in their custody was consensual, and then the police will not be charged with felony sexual assault or rape.
So forget about what the woman has to say. All the police got to do is say that it was consensual.
Forget about what the woman has to say. Forget about an investigation. Forget about due process in 35 states.
I can't believe that it's that high, 35 states.
I'm actually shocked that it is that high. Wow. I just figured this was the way they did business. I have to be honest and tell you, I did not know that these were actually laws. I just thought that this was what the cops did. Right? You know, to cover their own asses. But I did not know that there were actually laws on the books in 35 states that say that if a police officer is accused of rape by someone who they detained, all they have to do is say that the sex with that person was consensual. And then they won't be charged with felony rape or felony sexual assault. And that does not mean that there will not be an administrative.
But you're asking the police to investigate themselves, which never goes, that never goes good.
So there are, there might be administrative punishment that might happen, desk duty, administrative leave with pay. They may get fired, but again, that's up to the discretion of the police union and the police department, the police chief of that police department. But as far as felony and investigation into felony rape or felony sexual assault in 35 states, all the police have to do is say, nope, she wanted it.
That's crazy. I mean, one thing I will say is when I was living up in New Jersey, and I won't name the city, but I used to do street outreach work, up in that city, and I could tell you how many times we ran into women ladies of the night, prostitutes, who would tell us that they would be picked up by the police. And in order for them to be released or not go to jail, they had to perform sexual acts with the police in order not to go to jail or be released. So that happens a lot.
And aside from like personal stories of people, who know that this kind of thing happened. I mean, it's kind of cool sometimes when you can point to art and say that, no, art really does imitate life, and use it as an example of a real life horrible thing that is going on. Because like the blaxploitation movies that we love, right, like the Foxy Brown and Coffee and Superfly, and all of these, a great series that I hope they renew.
The Deuce, right?
The Deuce.
Oh yeah, The Deuce.
Yeah, that's
HBO,
a great series on HBO. One of our, isn't David Simon?
He's the producer.
He's a producer, one of our favorite producers. Really great series. But the theme of police abuse, police sexual abuse of sex workers is a recurring theme in all of those movies. Almost every single one of them. And in a lot of movies from the 70s.
Right.
You'll see this recurring theme of the police sexually abusing sex workers. And you look at that, and I'm wondering if people were looking at those movies then and saying, oh, I know people, I know a girl who is out on the track and she said this happens. But I wonder how long people have watched those movies and said, oh, that never happens.
Well, I mean, if you grew up in the neighborhood, you knew it.
You knew it. That's true. Right. You knew it happened. But in 35 states in this country, in order, all the police have to do, is say she or he, because let's not assume that the only people police officers are sexually assaulting are women.
Right.
All the police have to do is say he or she wanted it, and they get a slap on the wrist in 35 states. So that's one part of the example of how corrupt our law enforcement system is. Because, see, that law shouldn't exist.
And the fact that there's no political will to do anything about it.
None. And I can tell, even by the discussions that I've been involved in when this story was circulated on social media just this past week, people are understandably outraged, right, that these laws exist.
Right.
But people are so focused on, well, why isn't it statutory rape? Because the young lady in the New York story was 17 at the time, I think. Why isn't it statutory rape? And why isn't it this? And how could it be that? And people are trying to have a conversation about something that is illogical in the first place and trying to make it logical, which is that's just a waste of time. And they're also coming at this conversation from the perspective of, don't the police know that this is the wrong thing to do? Yes, they do. And they don't care. Yes, they know this is wrong. That's why there's a law making it okay for them to do this. So I think for those of us who recognize that there has always been a problem with law enforcement in this country. No, let me change that. For those who are just coming to grips with the fact that there is an enormous problem with law enforcement in this country, I think you need to come to the discussion with exactly that attitude. There is a serious problem with law enforcement in this country. The problem exists. Mm-hmm. Police operate under these rules. Police in 35 states operate under these laws. And police in every other state operate under the blue wall of silence that still lets police officers get away with spousal abuse.
Right.
That doesn't get talked about, that rarely gets reported and never gets addressed, but that actually happens in at least 40% of police families. And operate under the blue wall of silence that allows police officers to not just rape people, but kill people and commit other crimes. And this is where the other story comes in. This story is so enormous. I mean, that story is enormous, right? But this story is so huge. I was so appalled as I was watching the coverage, well, like we were talking today on when we were on Eugene and Sean show, by any means necessary. I was so appalled as we were watching CNN this past week, off and on, because we've been watching Al Jazeera mostly, and watching a lot of global news, which has been fascinating.
Oh my God, yes.
Oh my gosh. But I was appalled that no national media outlet is covering the police corruption trial in Baltimore right now. Oh, you didn't know there's a police corruption trial going on in Baltimore? Oh, I know you didn't know, because the only people who are covering it are Baltimore media. I'm going to provide you a link to the entire trove of articles that this crime reporter has provided from this trial for 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, it's been about that.
2.5 weeks. Now, if you're a fan of The Wire, like we are, huge fans of The Wire, Baltimore Police Department being corrupt is not new. Not new. You've always known that. If you live in the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, Baltimore Police Department being corrupt, shady, and really scary, not new. You knew about it. You knew about it. But to hear police officers testify in open court about the things they did to not just criminals, but to innocent people alike, that they profiled, the profile. I mean, we're talking about stuff like, this is the unit that's on trial in Baltimore is called the Baltimore Gun Trace Task Force. Their job, why are you laughing?
Gun Trace Task Force. Oh my God. Well, wait, when you start getting into some of the things that these guys were accused of doing, allegedly have done.
I mean, that's the thing though. The stuff that I'm about to tell you is not even stuff that they are accused of doing. The stuff I'm about to tell you comes directly from the testimony of the former police officers who did it. I mean, okay, so there was a murder of a police officer last month. Was it last month? Detective Daniel Suter, he was murdered the day before he was supposed to testify in this trial against the other officers in the task force. He was going to testify for the state to the crimes that the task force members and he committed.
But somehow he ends up dead.
Somehow he ended up dead the day before he... And his killing was designated a murder by the Baltimore Police Department. They still haven't caught the person who killed him. One person who testified to the crimes that members of the Baltimore Gun Trace Task Force committed was an Officer Gondo. He testified, excuse me, that he and others stole money, not just from known drug dealers, but from people they profiled.
Mm-hmm.
Just random people that, like, they would say that any black male over 18 who's carrying a backpack was probably a drug dealer. Why would they say that? Because their reasoning was that no grown man over 18 should need to have a backpack. Yep. That was their reasoning. So they would just be stopping men walking down the street with a backpack,
mm-hmm.
going through their stuff, and if they had money on them, because they thought they were drug dealers, they would take it. They would take their money.
This is in violation of all civil rights, and we talk about stop and frisk and all that stuff, but this is just mm-hmm. a violation, just plain civil rights right there.
Yep. So Officer Gondo, one of the interesting things that he said in his testimony was that he has been doing this. He's been stealing from people mm-hmm. while he was a police officer for at least 10 years. And for years before he was on this task force. And he kept doing it because, in his words, he never worried about getting caught because I never put my hands on anybody. So as long as he didn't beat anybody's ass, he didn't have to worry about anybody reporting. Right. Remember a couple of years ago.
I was ready to mention that when the Baltimore Sun did an expose on police brutality in Baltimore.
Look, we've been talking about this stuff for years.
And I think they did that around the time of Freddie Gray, when the Freddie Gray thing first happened.
They did. And there was this enormous, they looked into the records, because they've always been reporting about the problems with the Baltimore Police mm-hmm. Department and excessive force claims. But the Baltimore Sun did an amazing expose on the epidemic of use of force claims against the Baltimore Police Department. We'll provide you with a link to that too. It is a must read in order to understand the environment, the culture in the Baltimore Police Department. So it's important.
But even in spite of the expose, which I thought was excellent too, it never got a lot of traction outside of Baltimore.
It did not.
None of the really national media, none of them picked that up.
Nope, they didn't. It didn't get a whole lot of traction out of Baltimore, and it's a shame because it puts everything that happened around the Freddie Gray case.
Yeah, but I know why that the national media didn't pick it up, because all of the people that they highlighted in their story were black.
Yep.
And we've said mm-hmm. this on this show time and time again. and dealing with police brutality is the fact that, especially in Baltimore, nobody cared because it was mostly black. It's just like down when the cop in Oklahoma, mm-hmm. I think he
Daniel Holzclaw.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he sexually assaulted 30 women?
33 women.
Yeah. And even though, they did the right thing and put this guy away, but still, it took so much in order for the state of Oklahoma and the town that he was working for
mm-hmm.
To really prosecute this guy and do anything about it.
Yeah.
We've said on this show time and time again that there's a large segment of the society that doesn't care when black people get abused by the police.
Mm-hmm.
There's a large segment of the society that believes that when the police, and Donald Trump said this on his when he was running for president,
mm-hmm.
when he met with the police and said, hey, look, no, he was already president, and he met with the police and said, you don't have to treat these people nice. And all of these code words going out. So it was understood, and it's been understood by a large segment of the people, that when the police violate black rights, black lives, and everything else, well, hey, look, these guys, and when I say these guys, I'm talking about black people, they got it coming.
Mm-hmm.
They're not taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Had the Baltimore police, and I want to get into some of the things that the Baltimore police were doing. One of the things that they were doing, they were breaking into people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
And they were carrying toy guns on them. And just in case they shoot somebody,
mm-hmm.
and they could plant the toy gun on them and say, you know how cops do.
Yeah.
And say, well, they were in fear of their life. This is also reminiscent of in New Orleans back in the 90s when the New Orleans Police Department were committing outright assassinations of citizens who were making complaints against their against police misconduct.
Yeah, and actually I told you this story before, but that it actually brought this back to me. I went to I went to a big the Essence music festival. Right. And I went there by myself one year, and I'm in the cab, and a cab driver asks me, are you by yourself? And I'm ridiculously crazy. I'm just like, yeah, I'm all by myself. Just don't ever do that. But I said, yeah, I'm by myself. He said, okay, well, I'm going to give you some advice. And this was a white guy. This was a white cab driver. He said, I'm going to give you some advice. He said, don't go out onto Canal Street, after a certain hour, by yourself. Stay, what did he say? He said, if you want to go over to Mid-Airy, make sure, you get the name of a cab company to come pick you up. Don't rely on a cab, don't try to hail a cab across the bridge. And he said, whatever you do, if you need help, do not ask the police. And I was like, what? Huh? So then he began to tell me the story about the woman who was supposed to testify against the police down in New Orleans in this trial in which the police apparently killed someone, and they put a hit on the woman on the police CB radio.
Yeah, when the FBI investigated, they were actually calling the hit in on their police radio.
And confirming, is it done? Yeah, she done. And it was either 60 Minutes or Nightline that did a story about that, because that turned into a huge federal case, and that's where the DOJ consent decree came from for the reforming the NOPD. So this kind and it's there are stories like that. People think that these kinds of stories of egregious police abuse and corruption and assault against people are like anomalies. They're not. They're really seriously not. This is commonplace.
And one of the things that somebody said on one of the comments about the police mostly being Republicans, but one of the things that we have to be honest with is that a lot of these cities that like this type of major misconduct takes place are ran by Democrats. Baltimore, run by Democrats. New Orleans, ran by Democrats. Camden, New Jersey, ran by Democrats. Philadelphia, Democrats, ran by Democrats. So we can't just sit here and say that this is a Republican problem or this is a conservative issue or anything like that. What it is the fact that this is how black communities have been policed since forever. The Black Panther Party. I mean, we can go way back and realize that every time the Black Panther Party was formed based upon police abuse. And that a lot of these black organizations, now we got Black Lives Matter and we got other things, but it's always the same theme, is the way that police our community, the way that the police interact with our community.
Right. So, okay, let me get into some of the stuff that came out. Remember, these are things that police officers have testified to doing in this trial just this week. Like you said, cops entered the homes of suspected drug dealers without warrants, and took money. And I know that some people are like, well, they're drug dealers. They should have their money. Suspected is number one. Number two, even if the person was actually a drug dealer, they didn't have a warrant.
Exactly.
If you're okay with the rights of the guilty being violated, then you are consenting to your rights being violated.
And then, and like you said, even if they were drug dealers or even if they still are owed a trial.
They still
they still have to go through due process in order, so.
Yep. Yes, Lisa, I am reading your comments. I just want y'all to know that we know you're over there and we appreciate y'all. Okay, so task force members would jump out of task force members would jump out of their cars. They would be in their cars and they would speed up onto groups of black men just hanging out on the street. And they would speed up toward them as if they were going to hit them. jump out, slam on the brakes, jump out of their cars. See, in DC, we call that the jump out squad.
Right, the jump out squad.
They do that in DC too. Yeah. The jump out squads were outlawed. They were stopped in DC for a while.
But people want to bring them back now.
Some people want to bring them back.
Right.
That's a whole nother conversation. Okay, so the jump out squad would jump out at groups of men they believed were dealing drugs, or groups of men who they thought were in what they believed were drug boy cars, and they would do it just to see if anybody would run, so they could chase the people who ran. Can you imagine being a black man? Well, I don't have to ask you if you can imagine being a black man and always being afraid. Y'all, can you imagine always living in a neighborhood where every day you are afraid to hang out with your friends, meet up with your friends on the corner just to talk, hang out with your friends in front of the carryout or in front of your apartment building and just shoot the breeze and just hang out and talk. You are afraid to do that because you are terrified that you are going to be a victim of the jump out squad. And even though you haven't done anything wrong, they're going to harass you and pat you down anyway.
And Baltimore, there was also a story not too long ago of the Baltimore police, which was on videotape planting drugs on people.
Right.
You remember that?
Yeah, that was a few weeks ago.
That was like about a month ago, but
yeah,
it's recent.
Right.
And they actually filmed them planting drugs on people.
Yeah.
In fact, in New Jersey, in Camden, where I'm from, about a few years back, a bunch of people got released out of prison because they had a group of cops in Camden that were going around planting drugs on people. And it been found out, and they all the people that they arrested, they had to let go because of that.
And I mean, I don't know how many times we have to. I can't. I'm tired of saying we're not making this stuff up. We told you. We told you so. We told you this is what policing is like. This is what law enforcement is to us. This is how they treat us.
Yeah, we don't have officer friendly.
No.
Yep.
Okay, so
we don't know who that is.
We don't know who we don't know. We used to have officer friendly.
We used to, yeah.
But no, not anymore. Not ever since the crime bill. Okay, so yeah, they kept BB guns. This officer testified they kept BB guns on hand in case they needed to plant a gun on someone they assaulted or shot. The officer who gave this testimony was asked if they ever had to actually use that. Of course, he wouldn't answer, whether they did. But he did admit that they did carry around BB guns, fake guns, so they could plant it on somebody, so they could use it to cover up the fact that they unlawfully beat somebody.
Yeah, Malaysia Figueroa, she said, because I need to read some of these comments because this is real for some people. Malaysia Figueroa, she said, when I was with my black/brown boyfriend, she said he was pulled over 22 times in 9 months. I only got one citation.
What?
Yours truly, me. I can recall when I took my mother to work. My mother used to clean houses for, rich people. And I remember coming home from work. My mother called me and she asked me to pick her up. This is a Camden suburb that she was doing this work in. And here I am working 14 hours. I'm tired. I'm at this condo that she's working in the parking lot, and I decide that I'm going to take a nap, because she's not done yet. And I wake up and I'm surrounded by the township's police department. And so, of course, I haven't done anything. So they asked me for my license. And my license had a Camden address, and so the cop asked me, he said, do you have any warrants? And I said, no. He said, you're from Camden and you don't have warrants? That's hard to believe.
Oh, wow.
And they proceeded to humiliate me. All the people started coming out of the condos. They was ripping through my car and this and that and the other. So the doctor who my mother was working for, he seen what was going on. He came out and he said, he basically vouched for me and said, well, his mother is working in my house. He's coming here to pick her up. They were all polite to him. And when they found out that, I didn't do anything, I didn't get an apology. I didn't get anything. I mean, they ripped my car apart. So the thing they said was, well, you know, you can lodge a complaint there. Like, what's that's going to do? You know what I mean?
Right.
So what I bring that up to say that there's not too many of us, black and brown men especially, who haven't had some kind of negative interaction with the police.
Yeah.
Very few of us have not had that. And it doesn't, and what's really amazing is the fact that this is not just, you know, poor blacks. I mean, there is so many stories of middle-class blacks, blacks who you know, who got pulled over because the cop think that you shouldn't have that kind of car, all these kind of things. So I mean, there's not really too many black and brown men who haven't had those type of negative interactions with the police. And I'm gonna tell you something, it does leave a bad taste in your mouth. I mean, I remember when that incident happened to me, how angry I was. I just felt so violated, and I mean, I just could not. I mean, it really created. I remember carrying that for a long time. I mean, those type of negative feelings, you know, about that incident.
Yeah, somebody over in the chat on YouTube said this is why our black boys are so traumatized. I absolutely agree. I mean, I believe, just like you said, we have a whole multi-generations of black men. And increasingly black women now, because it's not like they're just, we just told you about the sexual abuse. You don't think they're doing that to mostly vulnerable, poor, black and brown, especially Native women? Yeah, they are. So, I mean, yeah, we're carrying this trauma around, this multi-generational, multi-systematic, multi-level trauma that comes from all over the place. But you said, you brought up your car. This is an interesting thing that he said. So they said that they would stop what they believe to be drug boy cars.
Which I don't even know what that is.
Well, I'm going to tell you what they think they are in a minute. That what they believe to be drug boy cars, and they would stop people who they felt like were driving these drug boy cars, and they would claim, you know, they would lie to them, claim that they, you know, stopped them because they didn't think they were wearing their seatbelt, or because their, you know, their windows were tinted too, you know, too much, their windows were tinted too much. But what's a drug boy car? And now this is really ridiculous. They would stop particular makes and models of cars, Honda Accords or Honda Odysseys. You know what a Honda Odyssey? It's a minivan. These people, the police, believe that Honda Odysseys were cars that drug boys drove, not mothers with children.
Right.
Can you imagine? Do you imagine how many times they stopped a Honda Odyssey, and the person driving was a mama and her kids? And can you imagine how they traumatized those children? Do you think that they apologized to that woman?
No, of course not.
Come on. Honda Accords, Honda Odysseys, and Acura TLs. Those were the three cars that they designated as drug boy cars. Not cars that, not like, what's a high-end car that I can see? I'm not even into cars that much.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, Lincolns,
Infinities,
or Lexus.
Yeah, not like a Lexus. Not seeing a Lexus in the worst neighborhood in Baltimore. That would make sense to me. Not seeing, and I understand that police have a record of the kinds of vehicles that they, you know, that they take. But come on, are you?
I mean, it's still profiling. I mean, it's racial
profiling. It is racial profiling, and they do it all of the time. Let's see. I said that the men over 18 who had backpacks. Somebody in the chat over here said that homeless people can't live without backpacks. That's a great point.
That's a really great
That is an excellent point. Also, how about college students, grad school students? They're over 18. College students are over 18.
Yeah, Baltimore's full of colleges.
But all black men over 18 who have backpacks, they're suspected drug dealers. Okay. They illegally use police resources to find. This was actually very frightening. They illegally used police resources to find the address of a man they stopped in a fictitious traffic stop, one of those made up traffic stops. They took his house keys, ran his address, went to his house, broke into a safe that was locked in his house, found drugs and money, stole $100,000 from the safe, and then they started filming. They closed the safe back up, and then they started filming with their body cams as if they were just then opening the safe. And they filmed themselves calling in that they found this safe. But see, they weren't supposed to be at the man's house in the first place. They had no warrant. He didn't have any drugs in his car. They had no reason to go to his house.
But it also shows how the body cam thing has not helped at all.
Body cameras are not going to stop police brutality. If YouTube videos of people getting murdered by the police has not done anything to advance legislation, not task forces with recommendations, but legislation and policy changes to address police brutality and excessive force, body cameras aren't going to do it either. Because they can turn them off.
Right, and I think that if you really want to look at it, it just shows, you mentioned something, you say legislation. And this is actually something that government has to correct. So we're talking about a community that politics have failed.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That there is no political will. There is no politician. I don't care if it's Democrat, Republican. Nobody wants to get on the wrong side of the police.
Exactly. And so I'm going to give you links, and it's a lot of articles. It's like 3 pages of articles. The author, I think he's done a great job. I think he's done a great service for not just Baltimore, but for anybody who demands, who is interested in justice and fair policing. I don't even know if the 2 words can exist in the same sentence in this country anymore. I don't know that they ever could, but we got to do better than what we have now. And we're not going to if we're not honest about what's going on. We can't be honest about what's going on if we don't know. One of the links I'm going to send you is also this report of 700 cases of police sexual abuse.
Oh, wow.
700 cases that the Buffalo Times, a news outlet in Buffalo,
New York,
did of 700 sexual assault cases against police officers from around the country. And you can see where a lot of those police officers were convicted and a lot of them went to prison, but way too many of them were not. And way too many of them did not go to prison. And stayed on the job. So you're going to get that. Well, there's going to be a lot of information we send you. Share with
one
you.
of the things that I wondered, because we talked about this on By Any Means Necessary. We discussed this personally. And why is it that politicians, no matter whether it's Democrat or Republican, why is this reluctance to be against, police abuse and misconduct when it comes to black and brown people? And one of the things that Jackie and I, this is what we call the Luqman theorem, right? We do this
one
sometimes.
Of many. One of
the things that the Luqman theorem is that the reason why is because we have to understand and that the growing inequities in our society is becoming so wide that the elites or the oligarchies or whatever you want to call it, the political class, they know that they're going to have to rely on the police to keep the pitchforks and the flames and the torches from coming after what they have. So what it is that you just constantly give little tokens and you give all of this leeway to your military, which is that the police is the military of the oligarchy. You know, so I mean, to me, that's the easiest reasoning that I could come up with the reason why that there's not a lot of political will to really address this. I mean, in all of these cities like Baltimore and stuff, they got these black mayors and black city councils. Some of them even got black, in Baltimore, I think they got a black police commissioner. Right. So, I mean, we understand that it's not what you look like. We understand that, it's not, just being black is not it.
All our skin folk ain't kinfolk.
That's right. There is a culture. There is an ideology. There is a way of thinking when it comes to the police department that when it comes towards poor black and brown people and white folks too, in some areas, poor whites too. I mean, you go to some of these places in West Virginia or somewhere we got a lot of concentration of poor whites.
Oh yeah,
I could tell you, I lived in Philly, and during the time in Kensington, where there's a lot of poor whites in Kensington, police are just as brutal to them too. So it's definitely a economic class issue.
Right. I mean, it is a multi-layered issue. There's definitely a racial issue, but there's definitely a class aspect to the issue too. And I mean, none of it's going to get solved if we're not honest about the fact that there is something deeply wrong with law enforcement in general, all of it, all forms of it in this country. We see it even in, we're going to try to connect again to our friends at 1DC, and we're going to go to a public housing project that's like ground zero for a massive gentrification here in this area, and they're using private security firm, not like a Blackwater type firm, but like security guards, to harass the tenants.
Right, we spoke about
this
that too.
Yeah, we talked about this on a few shows ago, and we're definitely going to try to connect. So we're not just talking about FBI level COINTELPRO kind of kind of abuse where the federal law enforcement agency is targeting black activists. It's that. But it's also your local sheriff who is not only abusing his wife, but he's raped women in his custody. And so have his deputies. And they have beaten people. And, there's all kinds of other levels of corruption going on. And this kind of stuff happens all over this country.
Yeah, Cindy Kay said that Houston has a black mayor. He will not accept criticism of our police department, and they are corrupt to the core. Well, I mean, Cindy, that's what we're talking about. The fact that just being black, doesn't help poor black folks. Just being black. And we spoke on this show plenty of times about the black political elites and the black oligarchy, which they have the same thinking. I mean, they view poor blacks in the same lenses as the white oligarchy does for the most part. So, I mean, and one thing, Jackie, that I like that you said earlier, and because we got to give our audience something to do.
Yes.
To our white allies, I mean, you guys are critical in this because we've been marching, we've been fighting, we've been getting our heads bashed in, tear gassed, and all this other kind of stuff. But the reality in this country is the fact that we as a demographic, black people, black and brown people, we're politically weak. We're on the lower part of the caste system, and and this is where our white allies really have to step up. And if you live in these cities or you live close to these cities, it's important that you attend a lot of these city council meetings. Right. It's important that you link up with a lot of the activists that are fighting this kind of stuff, and just be known and be seen so that they understand that it's not just black and brown people fighting, because that's the problem too. Right. They can so easily just say, well, of course they got a problem with it because most of them are criminals. But, you know what I mean? But the thing of it is that this is where you guys really are important, and that you have to really get involved in this, because we've been fighting this for a long time, and we can't stop fighting. But this is something where our white allies are really going to have to get their feet and hands and feet dirty in this.
Yeah, especially now that we live in a society where more people, more groups of people, more different types of people are becoming economically disenfranchised. You who are now the new poor, you who are new to poverty and new to not being a social majority, and not used to having. And I know that some of you never have had it. I'm just saying, those of you that, though, for those of you who this is new to you, you're now in that group of people who are seen as the other by law enforcement. Because I think you said earlier that law enforcement exists in this country to protect the haves from the have-nots.
Exactly.
That's what they're there for. They're not there for law and order. They're not there to fight crime. They're not. They are really there to serve the oligarchy, to protect the haves from the have-nots, and to keep us away from them.
That's right.
And the little perks that you said they get, it's the respect. It's the deference. It's the ability to abuse people and get away with it.
I mean, you know, police are supposed to be public servants. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, back in the day, they don't even have that on their cars no more, which shows you how the culture of police changed. It used to be, when I was coming up, protect and serve.
Right,
they don't even have that anymore.
Yeah, where were we? And there was a police car that didn't have protect and serve on it. And we were like, well, we're not calling them for it.
Exactly. So they're supposed to be public servants, but because of the culture, and because, like you said, of all of this deference and all this other kind of stuff, now it's just to the point, man, where they are actually acting, as I said, as the military wing of the oligarchy. Yep. And that's what they are.
Really. So we packed a lot of stuff into this show tonight. And we hope you guys learned some new stuff. And we see that y'all have been mixing it up in the chats a lot. And we love that. Yeah, we love that. We love it when y'all come with some comments. And you all have had some great comments. Lisa Webb, we see that you said good night, Lisa. So good night. We'll see you on Sunday night. And Shirley Vick, you're still hanging in there on the chat, and all of you lurkers. There's 7 people watching, and Shirley is over there in the chat all by herself now that Lisa's gone. So some of y'all in the chat on YouTube, say hi. Mm-hmm. So what have our friends on our page on Facebook had to say in these last few minutes?
Okay, Stevie J says the NYPD case with the girl in Brooklyn who was raped by 2 off-duty cops has upset me so much. To know so many states allow cops to have sex with people on duty. What is that? Get rid of the cops. They're all corrupt. And Stevie, 35 states. I did not know it was that high. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that, you know, politicians allowed that to go through, that's very frightening. April Gerald said that's because the Supreme Court ruled that they aren't here to protect and serve, but to enforce the law. Thank you, April. That is true.
Wow. Give us that Supreme Court case if you can, April. We'd appreciate that.
Let me see. Trucy, I hope I'm not messing his name up. Trucido Umbra said, I saw another guy recently who's fighting for UBI in the city of Cali. I don't know what UBI stands for, but let's see what else we have. Trucio again. Well, violent regimes seem to always win, and the right wingers I talk to even now say if you can cover up the genocide or no one cares, no one deserves even conversation. That's the actual attitudes of them, and that is true. Cindy K said American Gestapo. I agree with you 100%. Yep. Adam Hasluk said this police mentality is an exception in other countries, but not common. And Cindy K said I have cut people out of my life over this issue. Drugs wouldn't, Gracie Grimes said drugs wouldn't be here if Uncle Sam didn't want them here. That is true.
Come on now. Come on, Gracie.
Gerald said body cams are a joke because cops can turn them on and off along with the volume. You don't let corrupt individuals have control of their own oversight. And Robert Bulato, I love Robert.
Well, I know Robert. What's up, Robert? How you doing?
Robert said they straight up arrest the body cam before they arrested the cop wearing it, if it made a difference. And Melissa Figueroa says, laughing out loud, unlike the upstanding white kid dealing coke in the door. And you know, it's funny because somebody just shared a story with, well, it's been passing around, but we saw a story where a white guy in Jersey had 83 bricks of heroin.
Oh yeah, bricks. He had bricks.
83 bricks of heroin, and he got 6 months rehab. So I can only say this dude snitching.
He snitched on the entire organization. He snitched on the organization in this country. He snitched on the organization in Pakistan. He snitched on the shipper. He snitched on the people working on the docks.
Yep.
He was just... How do you have 8 bricks of heroin and get 6 months of rehab?
Now this is a good thing. It's 2 things before we wrap this up.
Okay.
Robert Bellotto reminded us that Sandra Bland, who we all remember, her birthday just passed. Rest in peace.
Oh, yes. Rest in power, Sandra.
Yep. And Melissa Figueroa, I like this. She said, please also advise our white allies to please not mouth off the cops for us.
Oh,
I have been in situations where other people well-meaning actions have been terrifying for us. Yes, Melissa, that is so true. You get the heart for that one.
So our friend Christopher, yes you do, Melissa. Thank you, honey. So our friend Christopher McMillan, who was lurking in the background, he said, I try to be more of a listener, but we're glad to see you, Christopher. And Bonnie, how you doing? Hey, from Chicago, Bonnie.
Oh, that's my friend Bonnie?
Yeah, that's Bonnie.
Oh.
So Christopher explained UBI, Universal Basic Income. So that makes sense.
Okay,
yes,
thanks. All right.
So yeah, white allies, like when we're out protesting and the police, please don't mouth off to them.
Right.
Don't do that. Don't get us both arrested. I mean, if we're out there to be arrested, that's one thing. But I mean, no. That's
because I mean, our experiences, they're going to treat you a lot better than they treat us.
You're going to go home. We got to stay in the
Exactly.
We got to stay in the tank with those people. So look, this has been a really, really great show. Y'all have been great in the chats, in the comments on Facebook, in the chats over here on YouTube. Again, follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Luqman Nation. When this video is done processing, share this video far and wide for everybody who wants to know all kinds of information. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Luqman Nation on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. We don't tweet very much, not really great at it. Sometimes we tweet. Mostly sometimes we retweet good stuff from other people. I just can't come up with really witty things.
No, I can't either.
With with only 188 characters.
Then they go up though, right?
That's not enough for me. It's still not enough for me. So, but follow us on Twitter to get some really good content from some other really great people at Luqman Nation, the #1. Contribute to us any way you can, either monthly through Patreon or one-time contribution on GoFundMe or PayPal, and you can find all of us on all of those platforms if you search for Luqman Nation, Luqman.
Yes, and the documentary is still coming. We're still working on it. What's really holding us back, folks, is funding. So, but we haven't given up. We're still working towards that. So. Just stay tuned to that. It'll be out sometime this year.
We'll get it done. We are going to get it done. There was one last thing that I can't remember what it was. Oh, there was one last thing. Dang it. And of course, as soon as what?
Tomorrow, Pit Bulls and Politics.
I said that at the beginning.
Did
yep,
you?
I
Okay.
did.
All
I
right.
did.
Yep.
I said it's your show, Mr. Pitbull.
That's right. Pit Bulls and Politics tomorrow.
At what time are you doing that tomorrow?
Probably around about 7. But it's Spreaker, so you can
on Spreaker.
On Spreaker,
and it will be available afterward. Yep. I really cannot remember what else it was that I was going to say. So thank you all very much for joining us tonight. Be very, very good to each other. And as always, peace.